The New York Post cover today reminding the President of the United States, you should not throw stones in glass houses. Well, classified houses, that is. That, of course, a reference to Biden's criticism of former President Donald Trump in a similar situation. In focus now, Republican Congressman Brian Mast of Florida, highly decorated military veteran and a part of a new House of Representatives focused on finding answers in this controversy and others with the President of the United States. Great to see you. Thank you for your service. First of all, where do you want to see this go with President Biden right now?
I want to see them investigated in the proper way. Let's outline the very literal difference between this and Mar-a-Lago. With Mar-a-Lago, all those documents were specifically delivered by the National Archives and Records Administration. They boxed it up in the White House or other places. They put it in a truck. They taped it up. They delivered it. They put it behind the doors, locked the doors. It does not appear in this instance that these items were delivered by the National Archives and Records Administration to what we could probably affectionately call lobbyist row, put it in office there above restaurants and other places. They were taken there through some other means, not delivered by the federal government. That is a very specific distinction on how this is different from President Trump.
You know, I want to get into what we now are learning about those documents. First of all, the president has said that he was told legally not to ask questions about what was in them. I guess that would be for plausible deniability. I'm not really sure. We'll have to ask him when we see him again as journalists. But my now question is, if there are foreign intelligence papers among that classified document batch, they call it a small batch from Biden's team, what does that mean going forward? Places like Iran and Ukraine mentioned in those papers.
It means that there's very potentially maybe individuals that have been compromised. There's sources and methods that potentially have been compromised. Information that we didn't want them to know we had that could be compromised. Those are potential stakes that are out there among an infinite number of others. But it is a very serious instance when you're talking about that kind of information and the people that we have on the ground around the globe.
One more on that particular point, because it was the Penn Biden Center when he was vice president where these papers were being kept inside of a locked closet. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, I believe it was, who said, well, they were in a locked closet. I don't believe that that's how we normally would say we'd keep classified documents in a non-secure building on a college campus.
No, let's be very literal about this again and how you store classified. There are very specific parameters about how many locked doors something needs to be behind, how it needs to be labeled, how those locks specifically work. Is it a safe? Is it this kind of safe? You know, it's not just as something labeled top secret or compartmentalized information or something else. Very specific parameters for how items are stored and where they are stored, whether there can be blinds on a window or whether there can be no windows. This information or the parameters of this are very specific.
Curious to get your reaction to this. Back in August, NBC News contributor Michael Beschloss actually raised the issue of execution over the Mar-a-Lago documents, and former CIA Director General Michael Hayden agreed, tweeting, "Sounds about right." What was this about to you? And I mean, how do you even speak to that?
I think it's beyond the pale to speak to that. I think I could probably tie this back in part to the weaponization of government committee that's going on right now, where you do have a left right now that has no problem with weaponizing the government against the people or against constitutional rights in general. That's why we as Republicans are putting forward this committee, and to say just briefly how much the other side is putting their head in the sand on this as a very real issue across the country. I listened to the Democrat weekly press briefing yesterday, and their chair, they used the term, they said, well, we call the Select Committee on Weaponization of Government, we call that the tinfoil hat committee. Those were their exact words. Wow. They don't recognize that it was a big deal that the FBI was looking at parents for going to school board meetings and being upset about what was taught to their kids, or the list goes on of all these instances where we could talk about where government was weaponized. Twitter going out there and saying, or the government telling Twitter they can't go out there and share information or report on Hunter Biden. That's the weaponization of government.
Definitely. Congressman, thank you for taking us there. You just mentioned in a divided House vote exactly along party lines, Republicans establishing a select subcommittee now on the weaponization of the federal government. And their goal, as you're saying, wide-ranging investigations into federal law enforcement, national security agencies. Politico calling this new layer of oversight Biden's next big headache. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy wielding his power, looking to leave no stone unturned on what the GOP calls an effort to silence conservative voices. Let's watch.
Our border's not secure, but look what they have done to our schools as well, right? We're going to pass a Parents' Bill of Rights. They weaponize from Homeland, FBI, and we've watched them get out of control with no check and balance. You've got to hold government accountable.
House Oversight Chair James Comer wasted no time today. He sent letters to 3 former Twitter executives. He invited them to come testify early next month, February 6th, on their role in suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story, and also just information that was coming off that laptop. Didn't want Americans to know what was coming. Your reaction?
That is the definition of the weaponization of government. It's not just what they do to individuals or entities or business. It's also what they don't do, who they don't work on behalf of, in unequal application of the law, specifically at the federal level, directed down from Washington, D.C. across the nation. That is the weaponization of it. So whether it's the FBI and school boards and Twitter or other media entities like that, or whether it's not going after investigating what happened with people leaking Supreme Court documents or those that are attacking pregnancy crisis centers. That's an unequal application of the law, and that's what's being investigated here, or will be investigated here. It does not have to be a headache for the president. It should be an opportunity to say, we will offer transparency to the American people. The wrong thing has happened. We will answer for that. As he said in his inauguration speech, he will answer for things that go wrong. I've yet to see it happen, but we'll be working on that on a number of fronts.
All right, I do want to get to this because this had all of America and possibly other countries around the world who were trying to travel here. Airports across the country still an absolute mess, we're told at this hour. However, planes are taking off and landing. The Federal Aviation Administration lifted that nationwide ground stop a few hours ago. Some damage had already been done, as you can imagine, with all the delays. Passengers now facing thousands of delayed flights. The FAA says the stop was because of a technology outage, but there's no answer on what caused it. Both the president and his transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, say they don't know.
I just spoke with Buttigieg. They don't know what the cause is, but I was on the phone in about 10 minutes. I told them to report directly to me when they find out. We don't know what the cause of it is. They expect you to be able to, in a couple hours, we'll have a good sense of the cause, and we'll respond at that time.
Okay, so Secretary Buttigieg tweeted earlier today that he's directed an after-action process to determine root causes and recommend next steps. Why don't they talk like real people? Congressman Mast?
They don't talk like real people because it's Washington, D.C. They try to confuse things, overcomplicate things. This focuses around an acronym known as NOTAM, Notice to Air Missions. People should think about this as like the text messaging app between ground sensors, air traffic control towers, and pilots in the air, whether they're general aviation or commercial or cargo pilots, you name it. It could tell them something as simple as runway lights are out or a runway isn't working, or something much more significant than that. It's not that one sensor was out at one airport, it's that the entire system to notify pilots and those coming in on international flights and other places was down. Now, the question could be begged, was that a cyber attack? Was it aging infrastructure? I wouldn't pretend to give you a clear answer on that right now whatsoever, because there is not an answer on that. But go ahead with your question.
No, just real quickly, I want the audience to know why I would particularly want to talk to you about this. You were on the House Transportation Committee and expected to rejoin in that capacity now in the majority Republican House. And my question would be, should there be an independent, transparent investigation on all of this? By the way, we have no reason to believe, according to the White House and others, that this was cyber, but we don't know yet what happened. So how deep do we need to go? The president says the Department of Transportation, Buttigieg and team, do we need more information than that?
So the places that you have to investigate, just to have good multimodal transportation across the United States of America that we can rely on. How does something as, you could call it rudimentary in some respect, you can relay these things by voice, but there's simply not enough people. How does something like that be prevented so you're not having something that hasn't happened since 9/11, that be a nationwide grounding of all air traffic? How do you prevent that from happening from something as simple as basically a messaging app between pilots and the ground? What redundancy needs to be put in place so that billions of dollars of travel costs aren't incurred upon the airline industry and passenger flight delays and everything else that goes along with that taking place overnight and in one morning. So yes, investigation is responsible on that to say, where do things have to be fixed? How can we make sure that it's safe from attack in one way or from the system just going down? We need better redundancies, and this is something that the aviation subcommittee that I do sit on, or will continue to sit on, will also look at as well.
Congressman Mast, with your expertise on that, very grateful. Thank you for being in focus today.